Hey homebodies, in this episode with Diana Vuolo, we will be discussing topics such as sexual and domestic violence, drug abuse, childhood trauma, and the prison system. Please be advised as you listen, and thank you for watching. Why choose children who have parents that have been incarcerated or that are currently incarcerated?
When children's parents are incarcerated, it's considered one of the adverse childhood experiences, which are some of the worst experiences of trauma a child can experience. Most children don't have words to express what they're going through. And that's the beauty of the music part, because you don't need words to express music or to be affected by music and to be healed by music.
Do you think most people today in our community know about the problems that these children are facing and are choosing to kind of turn their faces, or do you think people just genuinely are uneducated about it? Welcome back to the Introvert City podcast, where we discuss culture, media, and faith from the perspective of an introvert's complex mind.
Yes.
I'm Carina.
Yes, and I'm Seth. A very hot and sweaty introvert's complex mind after last week, guys.
Last week was
It
rough.
was 97 degrees last Friday.
I was like, am I in Florida? Don't want to be in Florida.
We were in New York, and it was really humid.
Yes, we were in New York for Seth's cousin's animation
art gallery
premiere. It was a really cool experience.
A lot of fun. Yeah. It was really hot and humid, but our outfits were amazing. You guys could probably see that on either of our Instagrams. We had a great time though. We had a really, really good time, and it was a great experience. She got to meet a lot of my family, and it was a really good time.
I didn't realize how many artists were in your family. It was really cool. Like, I always kind of knew that, but being in that experience and meeting different members of your family and seeing the real products that your cousin created was so cool. And just, it's always so beautiful to see artists gathered in the same place. And it made me think about you and all of the things that you do with your music and everything, and kind of just reflect on how music has been there for you, right, throughout your whole life.
Yes. I mean, I've always kind of had music. I ever since I was a kid, I just always loved singing, and I've always loved learning about music. And I've taken a lot of time in my life to learn about music theory and jazz theory, and just a lot of really fun things. And and piano and guitar and vocals have just been a very important part of my personal life. But even for you, Carina, you as well. Yeah. I remember seeing you sing in Troubadours in school. She has a great voice, guys, but she'll never tell you that.
That's enough.
But we both have, music has been a really important part of our life for both of us, and that actually relates to today's topic and today's guest.
I think it's beautiful that music has been an outlet for the two of us throughout all of our hard times, throughout everything you went through as a child, moving a lot and going through a lot of different, I know trauma is kind of thrown around a lot, but you did kind of endure a lot of things as you were growing up, and you always told me that music was something that helped you through that healing process. Yeah. So today we have a guest in the studio who has dedicated her career to helping kids discover that same outlet of music and healing. So Mrs. Diana Vuolo, who is a determined and compassionate entrepreneur with a resilient backstory, founded SWAN, which is Scaling Walls One Note at a Time. And it's a music and support group, for children affected by parental incarceration. And I think it's really cool that we're talking about this, by the way, today. We've had some really hard conversations with guests on this podcast. I don't know, for those loyal listeners, when we had David Garlock on the show back in season 1, who talked about his experience in the prison system and talking about the justice system, that was a really heavy conversation. So today we kind of get to talk about the other side of it and how kids are affected by that. So I think that'll be really interesting. But based in Lancaster, PA, which is so cool, Lancaster community. I love it. The students receive resources and opportunities, including free music lessons, ensemble training and performance, and mentoring from local music teachers. So, without further ado, Miss Diana Vuolo, thank you for being here in the studio today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here and with your podcast audience.
Of course, welcome.
Yes. So I actually think we should ask our original question. We were like, do we ask in the beginning, in the middle? But
we'll ask now.
Yeah. Every guest that comes on our podcast, we ask the essential question of whether you're an introvert or an extrovert and how you feel that has affected your field of practice.
Oh, that's a great question. By nature, I am definitely an introvert. When I go to social settings or I'm out all day with meetings, I'll come home and my husband might call me, on his way from home, and he'll say, "Diana, what are you doing?" And I'll just say, "I'm staring. I'm just sitting here staring." Because that's my way to recharge,
Yes.
I don't get charged by being out and about and talking with a lot of people. I recharge by being quiet. So I think that's one mark of an introvert.
Definitely.
However, I've had to really work at being more extroverted as I've worked with SWAN. And one of my inspirations, honestly, has been my kids, the kids that I'm representing, because with a nonprofit organization, what we're called to do as executive directors and founders is to educate a community and bring to attention a problem that we're trying to have the community come together, rally together with to solve. And in order to do that, we've got to be talking and out and about, and we actually have to be community leaders of all things, right? So there is a Bible verse that I refer to oftentimes in my heart, is that perfect love casts out fear. So by nature, I would probably resist going toward a microphone. I would kind of walk away from a microphone or a television camera. But that perfect love to bring attention to a problem that our children are very much suffering with and try to bring solutions to them is what compels me to move toward the microphone or toward the television camera. So I'm grateful for that grace.
That is beautiful and so well said. Thank you so much again for being here. We're so excited. That reminds me of the conversation we had with Ned Buster and Abner Gonzalez, both local Lancaster artists. We're talking about the importance of the section of the Bible that talks about sort of dying to yourself and how introverts have to almost die to themselves in a way where they just want to kind of cram up and be alone and recharge alone all of the time. But sometimes making that sacrifice looks like being in public spaces and spreading those kinds of messages. And I just thought of that when you said that.
Well, wow, we really get each other, don't we?
First, we'd just like to ask you to give a brief life testimony, maybe of where you grew up and the types of things you did and what led you to where you are now.
Oh, I'd love to tell you a little bit about my inspiration for SWAN. I think, our callings stem out of our life experiences, of course. And so I actually scaled my walls a note at a time by playing the violin. I had an abusive father rather, and I used to ask my mom at a very young age, why don't you leave him? And of course we weren't coming from a Christian perspective, and her answer was one of fear, and she also would say, well, how can I support you kids? I had 3 other siblings. And so I used to think a lot, as a young kid, how are we going to survive this? And I thought, well, if I ever get married and if I have children, I don't want that to have to be my answer if something like this happens to us. I want to be able to protect myself and protect my children. So at a young age, I determined, I think I'm going to need to train for a career. And so I had a violin. And I thought, well, I know violin can be a career. And so I used to practice, I think, inordinate amounts of hours, which probably pointed to the fact that I was trying to survive through this route that I planned of survival. And so I used to practice and practice and practice. And the violin actually got me out of some of the abusive situations. So, for example, sometimes my mother would run up and say, "Dad's coming upstairs. Get your violin out, start practicing, close the door." And I would do that, and I would hear, sadly, him abusing other kids down the hall, but he'd go past my door because I'd be practicing. So the violin helped me in the moment of, throughout my childhood, but it also really helped me once I was not a child anymore. As a matter of fact, from that little row home in the city where I lived, I received a full scholarship to study with one of the world's finest violin teachers. Her name was Dorothy DeLay, and she taught at Juilliard. She was going to be teaching lessons in Philadelphia, and she wanted students in Philadelphia. So she had a list of students that she wanted, and I was on the list.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah, so I was very grateful. That kind of airlifted me out with a very, I was never really rebellious in the home, and I never, of course, told anybody my survival plan. But my father used to be very proud. Wow, look how hard Diana works. But he didn't know what my plan was. And when I received that scholarship, they were so proud of me. And of course, I had to move out of the house and go to Philadelphia to study. And so it gave me I say that it was like I was airlifted out of a very tough situation. And really, once I was out of that situation, through that route, I never returned to that situation. And I happen to have married the kindest man in the universe. So that's another part of the story.
Beautiful.
God's grace.
Do you mind if I ask a question regarding your faith? Did you grow up going to church? And I know you mentioned the situation with your father. Like, were you guys in church at the time? And if not, how did you find your faith on your own? Or what did that journey sort of look like?
Oh, I appreciate you asking that. I grew up as Roman Catholic.
Okay.
And I went to a Catholic school for 12 years. But sadly, in that era, there was a tremendous amount of abuse with the nuns, with the priests. And so it was an interesting era because I saw a lot of abuse in my home, but then I saw a lot of abuse in the church. And then I saw a lot of abuse with my friends, in my friends' homes. So it seemed like everywhere I turned, that was kind of normal, sadly. So I'm very grateful that when I was airlifted out of the situation and landed in Philadelphia, amazingly, God in his sweet providence had other born-again Christians as violinists in that same college and actually studying with the same teacher. And I was very serious because I wanted to have my performance lead to a position in a major symphony. So for that, you have to work very hard. And so I just hung around with other violinists that worked really hard. And they didn't party, they didn't do all the bad stuff. And they happened to be born-again Christians, which I had no idea what that was. But they were kind enough and in tune enough with the Holy Spirit and the Lord to witness to me, and it was through their witness that I was saved.
Wow. I can't imagine what that would have been like during your childhood, where it feels like everywhere you look, there's no safe place. There's abuse, even in the place where you're supposed to find safety, whether that's in the home or at the church that your family went to. Like, I can't imagine feeling like nobody is doing it right. That must have been so difficult.
It was, and I think, too, though, the redeeming factor of all that is that I think one of the ways I survived it is, number one, I was more of an advocate than a victim. Now, some of my siblings had more of a victim mindset, and most children do. I was more of a fighter as far as you touch me, you'll be sorry. Now I must say that mother bear protectiveness comes into play with me having founded a nonprofit organization where I am leading the community to be advocates for some of the most traumatized children in the city.
Yeah.
And the trauma that the children that we serve in Lancaster City in many ways doesn't even compare to what I went through. And so we could talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the problem that we're addressing.
If we could actually go to SWAN about the problem that you guys are addressing, and real quick before we do that, I just wanted to ask why. Why choose children who have parents that have been incarcerated or that are currently incarcerated?
Well, as I said, I married one of the kindest men in the universe, and he happens to be a pastor. His name is Chuck Vuolo. And after my children were raised, I had homeschooled them, and they were out of the nest. My husband started counseling criminal offenders. And so we would have the families over to our home. And that's where I started getting a really intimate view of what the children were going through. And it broke my heart to see the trauma that they were experiencing. And one of the little boys that I knew always wanted to play the violin. And of course, I had a whole lifetime of teaching children music. And so from my personal experience, I saw how much music benefits children. But additionally, I knew the research that underscores how important and how healing music can be for everyone. So my question was, how can I help? And I took that first step by thinking, well, I can provide a service where I can help children affected by parental incarceration through music. And then as years went by, it also developed that we saw the need that we should be providing mental health assistance as well. So it's developed, and we can talk about that a little bit as well. But it was in those years where I had an empty nest, and I was making, turning the next chapter over in my life to say, well, what should I do now, and what can I do to help? And that was the problem that was right in front of us.
This might be unrelated, but I'm not sure. It just came to my mind. What was the common reaction that you would see from children of incarcerated parents? Like, did they not fully understand the situation? Did they feel neglected by their parents? Like, was there a need that you saw specifically in those types of children as opposed to children who maybe struggled but not in that type of way?
Oh, yeah. There are definitely, when children's parents are incarcerated, it's considered one of the adverse childhood experiences, which are some of the worst experiences of trauma a child can experience.
Yeah, I imagine.
So parental incarceration is one of those traumas. One story I can tell you was of the little boy I started teaching violin to. His father was a sex offender, and he was preteen. The little boy was preteen. The family children were not affected by the sexual behavior of the father, but it was an outside in child that was. And that process of being found out, of the father admitting the guilt, of having to be arrested, to having to wait for the trial, to having to have the trial, wait for the sentencing, and wait for it all to happen, can take a couple of years. When the father was finally tried and sentenced, it was on the front news of this little boy's Lancaster newspaper. And all the offenses that the dad had done that were sexual, as far as, abuse, and that he was getting arrested for, every single thing was articulated, written about in the newspaper. And that little boy had to wake up the next day and go to school. And here he was, a young, 12, 13-year-old little boy. And most children don't have words to express what they're going through. And that's the beauty of the music part, because you don't need words to express music or to be affected by music and to be healed by music. Children won't have words to say, oh, this is bothering me, but the depression and the heaviness was something that, for a couple of years, even before the dad got sentenced, and then you're waiting for him to actually go to prison, and then he's there for a good number of years, and it's just very heavy. But then the other thing is when children's parents are incarcerated, and not in every family, but in many families, the protection of the child is removed. So if the parents are involved with drugs or dealing or trafficking, they're not paying attention to the children. But also, the home is not a safe place anymore. And predators will see that in a moment. And so one trauma follows another trauma after another trauma. So then there's multiple traumas, because the gateway, is open for other predators. And people who are into that, you know, who have a criminal mind, will see that and take advantage.
It's even living in a place as small as Lancaster and as safe as Lancaster, as everyone likes to say, it's just you would never know that about a person. And it just breaks my heart knowing that that boy had to go to school the next day when everyone knew the situation. That just breaks my heart.
And what is so crazy about those stories is that stories is just how people see them. Like stories, like things you see on the news. And it is so unbelievable and so unthinkable to ever happen until you meet that person, until you meet someone who's gone through that.
Yeah.
And just to know that these things actually happen are all the more reason to do the work that you're doing. So thank you for thank you for telling us about that.
Yeah, sharing. That's a very vulnerable thing to share. Thank you. And I guess something you mentioned that I want to dive deeper into is that you don't need communication, you don't need words when music is part of that healing process. Like, it's just kind of a nonverbal, beautiful thing, a gift that God has given us. Like, there's so much healing in music. So I wonder if you have any testimonies, or we can talk about that later maybe, but like how you've seen music change the lives of these children, or what that looks like for them to find healing in music.
Sure. I would love to share a story.
Yes.
An impact story, but I'll go back just a little bit. You had mentioned, you know, Lancaster being a safe place. And, you know, as we visit Lancaster, you see that rural, beautiful countryside and the Amish communities and on all. But, you know, it turns very quickly into this city. And Lancaster's violent crime rate is very high, actually. And SWAN is serving the school district of Lancaster, and most people may not realize that within the school district of Lancaster, there's about 1,000 homeless children right in the heart of Lancaster, and that's where we're serving in the school district of Lancaster. So why are those children homeless? Well, there's a lot of drug activity in Lancaster, so when a parent starts using, all the money goes toward getting that next fix. The parents will be high, they'll be out for days and not return to the home, so those kids are left alone. There's human trafficking of their children or others to support their habit. It's not very pretty when we look down in there. And then when we look at the stats as far as how many children in Lancaster might be affected by parental incarceration, there are well more than 3,000 children affected by parental incarceration who have a parent in prison on any given night. So that's part of the problem. And then you asked about an impact story, and I love to share this story about little Donnie. Donnie was abandoned by his mother, who was involved in drugs, and being raised by his father, who he very much loved. And so he had a close relationship to his father. And in, let's say, in first grade, he came home from school to be the one that discovered that his father had died from an overdose. And as a 6-year-old child who had a close relationship and was coming upon this scene, well, we know as adults that would have been traumatic for any adult. And there would be so much that an adult would have other adults helping them process that situation. But as a child, you don't have any of that equipment. You don't have that mental understanding of how to cope. And he went mute. It's called selective mutism, where he actually couldn't talk for several years.
Wow.
And he was then given to his grandmother, who became his guardian. And if and when Donnie talked, his grandmother said it was like war. Because he was so angry. So after several years of trying to help Donnie and nothing really worked, she signed him up for SWAN. And remarkably, virtually within weeks, Donnie started talking again. And he would run home from school. He was so enthused. He would run home from school, and we gave him a guitar, and he would play guitar chords for his grandmother, and he asked her if she could hear the difference between one chord and another. And that was the beginning of him healing, you know. And So, you know, that was life-changing for him and life-impacting, because if that selective mutism is not cured and changed while they're children, it will last through adulthood. So we were grateful, and we never expected that. But, you know, there again, the gift of music, God knows how much it can heal a person's heart and mind. And for Donnie, it gave him back his ability to speak.
Wow.
That's an amazing story. I just want to say that's an amazing story about the real, actual physical, like you can see those effects
Evidence, yeah.
of someone really changing through just simply something that gives them a chance to express themselves in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
That's such an amazing story.
Well,
that's
you
all.
know, it's been life-saving for other children as well. You know, when children are drumming, for example, within 20 minutes, their cortisol levels, which is their stress hormones, start to be reduced. So the cortisol levels reduce, and the dopamine, which is our happy hormones, increases, you know. So in one other class, we did have a child, after about 20 minutes, you figure he's drumming. His stress levels are getting regulated in a good way. And he's with a trusted teacher, and he enjoys the class. It was a group class. And he just blurted out after about 20 minutes of drumming what was happening at home, which was, I won't go into the details here, but it was something that was very severe and had to be reported right away. And for him, again, it was life-saving. But it took drumming, you know, which there were no words.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, it was like, bam, you know, the story came out. And the child was so happy that the story came out, but it was locked in there because children are told not to talk, not to say anything. They were even threatened, you know, and there it came out.
Mm.
So yeah, we're grateful to be where we are.
That is so beautiful.
In helping children.
And I just appreciate the genuine work that happens there, because so many people, I think, especially in this type of community, just speak about what needs to happen without actually saying that it needs to happen. For example, Christians will talk about adoption, the importance of adoption, and someone may bring up the horrors of the foster care system, and a lot of people would say, well, that's something we need to work on, but then nothing gets done about it. And I think work that you guys are actually doing, being in touch with the kids, like communicating with them, seeing actual results, seeing lives being changed, that's the type of work that people need to do. And they can't just speak it and say, we'll get to that. We see that these kids need help and we'll get to it. But you are actually doing it, and doing it through the measures of music. And I just think that's so beautiful.
Well, thank you. And it's an honor and a calling from the Lord, who guides our every step, right? Mm-hmm. To start a nonprofit organization, but the heavy work of making that nonprofit work really comes from the community at large. Mm-hmm. And I am so grateful to be part of the Lancaster community, because although the Lancaster community has a very serious problem, there are many in the community that rally around to support SWAN so that we can do the work we do, right? So it takes people who are willing to volunteer, to show up, to teach, mm-hmm. but it's also, you know, philanthropic, so people that are willing to give money. And when I look at the communities we could be in, I'm thrilled that we can be in Lancaster, because Lancaster's community really gets philanthropy. And all we have to do is look at a couple of our days of giving, you know, either the Extraordinary Give or the Faithful Give, and you'll see where not only are there 400 to 500 amazing nonprofits doing the work of helping to solve problems and lead a community to solve a problem, but then you see the outpouring of millions of dollars that's going toward those nonprofits so that we can, you know, really get in there and get into the classrooms and make that difference. So it goes both ways, and so mm-hmm. I really commend the community of Lancaster. I am so proud to be part of this community. They get philanthropy, they get problem solving, and so it's an honor to be here.
Wow.
It really is too. Just it is such an amazing thing, because how I'm viewing this, at least, it seems like it's just giving kids who wouldn't normally be given one, giving them a chance mm-hmm. at something amazing.
Well, you know, you're right about that. And although there are hundreds, and thankfully so, organizations that serve underserved children, for example, I would say that 75% of our children, the ones that we serve, would never get signed up for a program. And so that is the other reason why we specifically serve children affected by parental incarceration and the resulting trauma. So how do we get enrollments? Well, SWAN has a very close relationship with the School District of Lancaster. And before we were there, they didn't really know what children had parents who were incarcerated. But it's a very important thing to know about their students because it affects their scholastics and their behavior. So they were willing to listen to us and work with us. So we, knowing that there were about 1,000 homeless children and knowing that most of the kids that we need enrolled won't be signed up by their parents, we needed the social workers from the school district and the family counselors to help us find the kids and get them enrolled. And they have been heroes. They have literally knocked on doors to ask parents to sign the application and tell them the value of our program. And so we work closely with the School District of Lancaster. They help us enroll students, which we're so grateful for. And then, of course, word of mouth and whatever does help as well to get the enrollments. But they've been very helpful.
That's great. I have a question. You mentioned you were working with the school board and sort of educating people on the realities of this problem. Do you think most people today in our community know about the problems that these children are facing and are choosing to kind of turn their faces? Or do you think people just genuinely are uneducated about it?
You know, I just don't think, you know, we're busy and we have the things that we're involved in and the problems we're trying to solve in our homes and communities as we see them. I think there are a lot of very large-hearted people that would have very much compassion for our children. I think it's just getting out there as introverts.
Yes.
As, you know, getting out there to tell other people and to try to lead the community. Because I think once people hear and know, they will do something. So, like, again, I say, you know, now most people don't realize that 1 in every 50 children in the United States have a parent in prison. And the United States has 5 million children that are affected by parental incarceration. And as I said earlier, about 3,000 children in Lancaster County have a parent in prison. And then they don't realize, you know, maybe some of the problems that children do face when a parent goes to prison. States are spending exorbitant amounts of money to get people incarcerated, but very few programs are there to help the children. But when a parent goes to prison, their children often suffer from a host of difficulties such as trauma, separation, abandonment, homelessness, and poverty. And as a result, the children suffer physically, mentally, emotionally, and it yields, among other things, behavioral issues and substandard academic performance. So that's why we're grateful to be in the School District of Lancaster. Why music? Of course, music is abundantly researched. There's a lot of research on the help that music and the positive impact music makes. For example, music helps raise IQ levels. And neurologically, playing an instrument, there's actual brain growth within 15 months of playing an instrument. Behaviorally, music helps to calm or helps to reduce anger. Emotionally, it allows expression of emotion without using words. Of course, it's enjoyable, right? And socially, playing music individually or as an ensemble, performing for others helps to develop skills such as listening to others. Working together, it helps us with our confidence, self-control, and discipline. It helps with leadership, perseverance, presentation, and performance skills. And all of those things help the children to succeed in the classroom. So we're very, very grateful for music. But, you know, when we've been running SWAN for over 13 years. And what we also discovered was that our students need mental health professionals involved in their lives. And as I started researching that, I went to Mental Health America and some other foundations that are focused on Lancaster youth's mental health. Started just having a discussion because I'm not a mental health professional, I'm a musician. And what I found out was very interesting. First of all, the United States has a shortage of mental health professionals, by about 250,000 mental health professional shortage.
Really?
Yes.
That's so fascinating to me because I feel like in the United States, at least at this point in time right now, we're very big on pushing therapy and mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you find that?
I would have expected to be a surplus, but that's crazy.
That's
to hear.
interesting.
So if anybody wants some job security in the college, go in the health, social
Seriously.
work or mental health area, yes, because there's a shortage. And as a matter of fact, if your child was going through a mental health crisis, it would take 2 or 3 months to get an appointment. Well, of course, the children that we're serving probably wouldn't even get an appointment because their parents are not able, for one reason or another, to make those appointments.
Mm-hmm.
But by 2 or 3 months, you know, you're having a crisis, 2 or 3 months later, a child gets the appointment. Well, most children do not show up for those appointments. And then if they do, most children won't talk to a stranger.
Yeah.
So that's one of the problems. Now, our Rising Stars program is innovative, and it's new. And we started running it last summer. I'll tell you a little bit about that because there's no program like Rising Stars in the entire country. And so what we do is we combine music and mental health this way. Last summer we started our summer music camp, which ran for 6 weeks. This year it's running for 5 weeks. It's a full day summer music program from 8:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon. And we give each child a private one-on-one music lesson and group lessons where they prepare an entire program so that they can give back to others and share the joy of music with others. Mm-hmm. And of course, while they perform, they'll be developing their social skills and developing confidence and all sorts of wonderful things. But what we do is we also hire certified mental health professionals who float from one music class to another. So when our kids are drumming, they're drumming. The mental health professionals are drumming with them, or they're singing with them. And when our children have a crisis, which they do, and when they trigger, which they do, they get immediate mental health assistance with someone they know and trust. Mm-hmm. That's unheard of. Additionally, there's time in that music camp and our extended after-school music program for them to not only get the one-on-one music lessons and group lessons, music lessons, but also to get the social emotional learning class and the trauma management classes. Mm-hmm. So we combine that during our summer music camp. But then during the school year, instead of having our 1 hour class, which we still have our 1 hour classes in various schools throughout the district, we run a 3 hour after school program so that the kids can have all that they get in summer camp during the 3 hour after school program. And that program for SWAN, which is swan4kids.org, if you look it up, you can look up our Rising Stars program and we'll tell you all about it.
I wanted to ask about the mental health part of it, because I do notice that I won't say what I do, but I've gotten to have the privilege of also working in the school district of Lancaster over the past 2 years as well. I'll just say I work with Scouting of America, and I've gotten to work with SDOL, and in particular, well, I won't say the name of the school, but the one school is right next to the Water Street Mission, and it's just, you do see some of these kids who they'll get out of school and immediately go to their parents who are waiting in line at the Water Street Mission. Mm-hmm. Or they'll have parents, talk to these kids and they'll tell you the most insane stories about their parents getting into accidents or getting into trouble or going to jail or whatever. And, most people don't think about the fact that these kids probably do have a lot of personal problems going on inside their head, but a lot of them might take it out in a way that might seem unconventional because it's what they know. And you can't blame the kid for that, because in reality, that kid might be a kid who's very, very smart. So many of these kids end up being really, really good kids, but because people have kind of like this scarlet letter written all over them, they choose to not give them help. And so I think that things like this Rising Star program and like SWAN in general, just give these kids an extra chance like I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm. So that was a great point, Seth, and I really appreciate you bringing that up because You know, when we're abused or violated or we're homeless, we don't look like we're going to amount to much. And yet, every child is made in the image of God and has this phenomenal set of talents that God has given them for their lives. And so SWAN taps into those gifts and tries to give relief. We try to heal, bring healing. And once we bring healing, you know, children can learn again. But we're trauma-informed. And as a nation, in the past, school districts have always been more disciplinary in the way they deal with behavioral issues. So, for example, if a kid's acting out, they'll get detentions, and then pretty soon it's suspension, and then it's expulsion, and then it's prison. Right, so that's the disciplinary approach to dealing with behavioral problems. But what you had mentioned was that, and what we often say is, children's behavior makes sense. So for the little boy that I had mentioned when he was drumming and he mentioned something terrible that was happening at home, and then we had children and youth come, he was in 4th grade before anybody knew that. So his behavior would not have been what you would expect in a classroom behavior to be from a child. Mm-hmm. But his experiences were extraordinarily awful. So once the school knew what was happening, they could actually help the child solve that problem and actually come around and help that child to learn. So that's a more trauma-informed approach to education, right? So that is what is a movement now going across the country, is to have this trauma-informed approach to educators, for educators to have, so they don't just react to a child's strange or uncontrollable behavior.
Yeah.
But rather they have compassion, they come alongside and they say, how can you help? Mm-hmm. And that leads to my next point, because SWAN is having our annual summer celebration on July 24th. And at that summer celebration, we have speakers that you will want to come and hear. These people are extraordinary people, but each one of them are survivors of parental incarceration and severe trauma, who have extraordinary careers and now are helping others. So let me tell you about that, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
So one of our guest speakers is Bill Z. He's an attorney, and he's an attorney that represents children who are having problems in the school district of Lancaster. But he's a passionate advocate for children affected by parental incarceration. And where did that passion come from? Well, both of his parents were drug dealers and users in Camden, New Jersey. And when he was growing up, he might have looked just like all of our kids. But there was one advocate that believed in Bill and encouraged him, because he knew he was smart. And he encouraged him to get an education, and Bill did. That advocate inspired him, and now he's a lead attorney in our district. But get this, he talks to our United States senators and helps them to understand the need for legislation, so that by state, that educators by law are required to be trauma informed. So to get off of that disciplinary approach of suspension, expulsion, prison, but rather, what happened to you? Why are you acting like this? Maybe we can help, right? So he'll be our guest speaker at our summer celebration on July 4th. Check it out on our website, swan4kids.org. Mm-hmm. But furthermore, we have another amazing speaker that will be at our event, and his name is Nate Dean, D-E-E-N. And I would encourage the listeners, and for all of you, to look up his trailer for his full feature film called Brave the Dark. Mm-hmm. Brave the Dark is in 2.5 minutes, he will show you what he went through himself as a child, which was severe trauma. He also was mute for about 2 years as a result. Was put in a orphanage, which was the Christ home, where he started to heal. But then the little girl that was kind of helping him come back out of his shell, she was adopted, so he was immediately abandoned again. And his story is drama-packed, but it's all true. And then one person in his life at Garden Spot High School became his mentor and saved his life. And it happened to be a theater teacher. So you can see that on Brave the Dark. It will be a full feature film that comes out. And then Nate went on to work at Sight and Sound.
Ah.
Okay.
And now he'll be also a speaker at our SWAN event on July 24th. So we have Bill Z and Nate, again, when they were going through that, looked like our kids and might not have been thought that they'll be able to succeed, but have braved the dark, beaten the odds. Of course, they had a mentor. One loving mentor is what it takes for a child to succeed and to survive. That's all they say it takes, one loving mentor. It can be so impactful. So it's a real inspiration. But then furthermore, one more inspirational hero of mine is Dr. Damaris Rao, who is the former school superintendent of the School District of Lancaster, and she was a foster kid. And now she was Dr. Rao, who has done so much, was of course attracted to come and be the superintendent for a school district such as Lancaster with 1,000 homeless children. And the resources and the inspiration that she gave those children while she served as superintendent is extraordinary. And she's still at it, even though she's retired now. She's inspiring many to be advocates in so many ways. And she'll be at our event too, and she'll speak. And so I, as a survivor, and Nate Dean and Bill Z, we get together. Man, the chemistry of that room when we get together is awesome. And I will encourage you, if you come to our summer celebration, which is something you can do to help SWAN, right? Because it's a fundraiser. I promise you, if you come, no matter how hard your day was, you will not only be refreshed by the amazing, beautiful venue, which is the farm at Eagles Ridge. By our children's performance, you'll be inspired.
Oh, they're performing.
Yes,
That's
all
exciting.
the music that they learned during summer camp. We'll have a beautiful meal. We'll have wonderful speakers. You will leave inspired and energized, and you'll have an opportunity to do something to help by helping us with our silent auction. There's some amazing things that will be fun to purchase, to make a donation, find out other ways to learn, to meet with our other SWAN community members, which I was boasting about earlier. It takes a whole community, right?
Yes.
We can't, I don't have the funds to run SWAN. It takes a community. You'll be so inspired and energized. So check out our website, swan4kids.org. Check out the event. It's called our Summer Celebration, July 24th. It's a Wednesday night. And come. That's what you can do to help.
Yes, thank you for that. We will have, for those watching on YouTube, we're going to have a link to the website, to any sort of advertisement, so you can check that out. And if you're in the Lancaster area, please consider showing up and supporting SWAN in that way. Before we close, I just want to add one more thought about something you said, about the way, at least in the United States, that we respond to children who are just misunderstood. In this disciplinarian, I understand sometimes discipline is good and action-based punishment is good, but when you're just looking at a child and diagnosing whatever they have and putting them in detention or suspension or and continuing that cycle in their life without truly understanding what they're going through, like I mentioned, it's a cycle and we're perpetuating it. And I mean, I think about my own little brothers and the times that I've misunderstood them and the times that they were so angry and I tried to, go into their room and talk to them and they just wouldn't talk to me. And in my head, I'm like, oh, well, you're just this. You need to get your phone taken or whatever. But when in reality, they need to talk to someone who understands them professionally. They can't just talk to me about it because I don't understand. And you're talking about these speakers that are coming who have been in the situation that the kids have been in and creating this safe place for the kids. And I think that's incredible. I think we need more of that in this community in the United States in general. So I commend you for your work. I'm so grateful you were here today. And I guess final question would be, besides showing up for this event, how else can people support SWAN?
Oh, yeah. Well, please visit our website, and check out, you can sign up for a subscription, in which case you won't be inundated, I promise you, but you'll receive pictures and videos via our email, which is about quarterly or so. So that would be awesome if you would do that. Pray for us. Pray for our kids. We are running a full-day summer music camp starting today. Actually was their first day. It will end on July 25th. And then, of course, they'll be performing, which there's a great benefit to that because the children not only get to give a gift to others, but then, kids who are used to failing, when they perform, all of a sudden they see that they're putting smiles on people's faces and people are applauding. And I have one more impact story to tell you about that, if you don't mind. It's difficult for us to present ourselves on stage, and when we have, as introverts, we'll know that for sure, right?
Yes.
Be on stage, oh no. So there are a lot of introverts, and so we know that. So our kids will perform as a group, which is a little bit safer, right? And then we give them an inspiration, that kind of that perfect love casts out fear. So we'll give them a motivation. Hey, we're going to this retirement residence, and we're going to share the beautiful gift of music that you have with others. Your goal is just to put one smile on one face. Just one smile on one face. And so we did that, and the kids will go to a nursing home. Maybe they'll even make little cards to give to others. So they're showing others, they're giving to others, which is always healing. Well, last summer when they did that, they went to their first nursing home and gave a concert. One of the kids, his name was Noah, he came out and he goes, he was trying to just put one smile on one face, and he realized that the whole place was smiling. Everybody was smiling. And when he walked out after the performance, he said, I feel like a superhero.
Oh my God.
Because he had well more than accomplished his task.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So that's a great story to end with. Thank you so much for your willingness to visit us at swanforkids.org and perhaps come to our summer celebration.
Amazing. Seth, do you have any closing thoughts? Or
I really loved this episode. Thank you again, Diana, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Deanna, who is one of your employees or volunteers. Yes. So she actually messaged us directly and recommended her and told us about SWAN. Yeah. And I just thought that was so cool because all of the guests we've had before have been like personal connections or like based on the school. And so this was the first time that I felt like our community is reaching out to us and starting this conversation. So thank you for being here, and thank you to Deanna for making that suggestion. And if you guys have any guests that you really would like to see us talk to, please feel free to reach out to us. Instagram, email, message, whatever. We want to build this community and to have your suggestions platform. So we're really grateful for that. We're so grateful you agreed to this conversation. I think it's really going to impact a lot of people, educate a lot of people. And with that, we will close. You can find me at Carina_B04 on socials.
You can find me at its_DANEYL on Instagram. You can find us at _introvert_city on Instagram. You can find us at the Introvert City on Facebook. You can find our TikTok as well.
Yes.
And yeah.
And continuing this season talking about entrepreneurs, artists, and faith-based organizations has been really successful so far. It's been great.
And also, not all of you are subscribed.
Please subscribe.
It's free. And,
thanks for being here, guys.
See you guys
next time. Take care. Bye, homebodies.